On the other side of the border lay Baluchistan, largest province of Pakistan, with an area greater than the British Isles but a population of considerably less than 1 million, reined back by a dauntingly arid geography. Fiercely independent, the Baluchis never really took to the Mughal Empire, but effectively retained their status as autonomous frontier tributary. In India they fought the Hindus and gained some influence in the Punjab and Sindh. Survival demanded expedient changes of loyalty and allegiance, sometimes as swift as the shifting desert winds. They formed alliances when necessary with Mughals, Persians, Afghans, or whichever bordering state it might eventually seem most politic to cultivate. Even when the time came, the British, who in 1841 were the last to arrive. We headed for the Baluchi capital, Quetta, laid low by the devastating earthquake of 1935, a month before my birth, but now almost entirely rebuilt. The name Quetta derived from the word Quetta, which meant a fort. Situated at 1692 meters above sea level, the city was surrounded by imposing hills and lay at the mouth of the Bolan Pass. Camping on the outskirts, we found the air cooler and sharper than we had felt on our skins for a long time, making for remarkable clarity of vision. The following morning, George, one of the oldest of our fellow travellers, remarked that he had been brewing coffee before dawn and had seen what looked like a shooting star behaving very oddly, for it slowly traversed the sky from east to west, imprinting a brighter pinpoint of light against the dimming star canopy. Not until we reached Amritsar, days later, did we stumble across an explanation for this phenomenon in a newspaper headline reporting that the Russians had sent the world's first spacecraft into orbit and had called it Sputnik. Nomadic tribesmen traversed the Bolan Pass each spring and autumn with their herds of sheep and camels. We came across an entire traffic jam of them, slowing our progress all the way down to the valley below. Snorting camels resisted efforts to direct them to the roadside. Flocks of sheep suddenly erupted under our tires. Owners with flailing sticks set upon their rebellious beasts and seemed as likely to set upon us as well for provoking their mutiny. It didn't help that we camera enthusiasts demanded constant stops to capture the highlights of this irresistible colour and movement. Lahore made me feel I was already home, seated in the garden of a palatial bungalow-style hotel in the Lahore cantonment at the end of a busy day touring the city sights. I listened to the crows in the neem trees and felt my journey nearing its end. The film version of John Master's Bhawani Junction had been released the previous year, and I recalled that a distant relative of mine, one of the kind Paul Scott would later label as staying on, had lent her bungalow to the production crew, seeking locations in this city, presumably for that part of the movie depicting the Anglo-Indian sector of the fictitious Bhawani community. There was much else to reflect upon in that crowded day. No other city had encompassed so many names familiar to me from the annals of Mughal rule. Robin Whitelaw and I visited both fort and mosque, the latter constructed entirely of red sandstone in a record time of 2.5 years. The mosque courtyard was said to be the largest in the world, a claim we had no reason to dispute, for our bare feet were scorched, spanning every yard of it under a blazing sun, from the gateway to the sublime relief of the pool where we could bathe our blistered extremities. The marble domes covered 7 prayer chambers. In niches above the gate were housed relics attributed to the Holy Prophet, his daughter and son-in-law, said to have been brought there by Amir Taimur. The following day was the worst of our entire journey, visiting upon us in quick succession one major inconvenience followed by two outright disasters. Traversing a narrow earth embankment between recently flooded grain fields, we tried to negotiate our way around a bullock cart and slipped over the edge, grounding both wheels on the right-hand side firmly in the mud. The dreaded shovels extricated from incarceration in the lowest strata of Luggage Mountain, where we had hoped never to set eyes on them again, were employed in relays as we tried to dig our way out of this mess. A team of labourers engaged on roadworks nearby graciously came to our assistance. In the midst of our combined efforts, one of the latter suddenly yelled that he'd been bitten by a snake. Since he had been standing more or less in the middle of our group, we all started hopping around as if dancing on hot coals, but there was no evidence of the culprit to be seen. Yet sure enough, there were the puncture marks clearly visible on his ankle. We had to rush him to the nearest hospital as fast as we could, and with no alternative means of transportation in sight, other than the still lingering bullock cart responsible for our predicament, this imperative lent renewed vigour to our toil. Once the wheels were clear, we raced to a clinic some miles away, where we left the unfortunate victim of the mishap in the care of nurses already claiming that, without knowing what species of snake bit him, it was going to be difficult to administer the right antivenom. Paddy was betraying the telltale signs of falling behind his timetable. So off we set, without resolving the mystery of whether or not the man would survive, down a Grand Trunk road seemingly congested with traffic perpetually. The rules of the road in India dictate that two opposing vehicles bear directly down upon each other until, at some point in the final seconds prior to collision, the lesser concedes right of way. Paddy, mercifully having no inclination to participate in this contest of wills, would always pull over at first sight of the opposition, hurtling towards him like a bullet from a dueling pistol. We were especially grateful for Paddy's discretion when we came upon the consequences of an instance where neither driver had conceded defeat. A mangled wreck of a bus lay partly across our path, a great dent punched into its cab beside the driver's seat. Still extricating themselves from this mortally wounded vehicle were dazed passengers holding their heads, carrying out the less fortunate, tending to screaming children. It was precisely the kind of tableau we'd dreaded encountering and had been spared until now. "Is there anyone left inside?" asked Paddy. Being nearest to the driver's cab, whose open door suggested the driver had not only survived but possibly even run away, I hauled myself up to take a look. In the front seat on the opposite side, which had taken the brunt of the impact, was a still living, still breathing, still conscious torso of a man, both limbs severed and gushing blood from his left side, pinned to his seat by imploded metalwork. He looked at me with a gaze beyond appeal, beyond hope, his eyes already glazing over. I dropped back to the road and leaned my head against the side of the bus. Unable to speak, Paddy could see at once that he needn't ask again. He hoisted himself up to the scene I had witnessed, fell back beside me and gripped my shoulder. "Too late for him," he murmured. "We've got to summon help for the others." Hastening on to the nearest police post, we reported the accident and left it to the duty officer to organize whatever succor was available. Nigel tried to console me. Lightning can't strike 3 times in one day. But it did. Barely an hour later, we came upon a horrific train crash, littering the rails alongside the road. In the early hours of the morning, a passenger express had sped headlong into a goods train laden with fuel. Although the collision had occurred several hours earlier, rescue teams were still hauling the living and the dead from crumpled carriages that had either compacted into each other in a concertina effect or had slewed in every direction, including upside down. There was nothing we could do that wasn't already being done, and the day we had been through was so stunning as to leave us dazed with impotence.